Yo, what's up guys, TheInsaneGamefreak here to bring you my game review of Fire Emblem Fates Birthright Edition, also known as Fire Emblem If in Japan. So, I'm doing individual reviews for Birthright, Conquest, and Revelations. As of this review, I've only played through Birthright and kind of did the prologue stuff for Conquest, so I don't know anything plot related towards those next two games. So this is primarily just I'm probably going to do most of the mechanics gameplay stuff here, whereas the other two reviews will probably be way more focused on characters, story, differences in level design, pretty much everything that isn't like specific, because the gameplay is the same over all three games. The only thing that's really different is the characters you're picking from, the map layouts, and the stories. So this is probably the longest of those three reviews. So let's just kind of jump into it. So Birthright's, and granted, if you've been following Fire Emblem Fates, you already know about the general story, but for those who don't, it's the whole, you grew up in Nor, which is the conquest side. That's where you grew up with your siblings, and you've been pretty much a recluse because you're not allowed to go outside of the castle walls through a series of events as you were starting to be bring more into the family during this wartime between them and Hoshido. Some stuff happens. You end up in Hoshido to find out that, oh, Hoshido's actually your birthplace, and that's where you come from. And your siblings in Nor aren't really your siblings, but your siblings in Hoshido are your siblings. And the premise of the game is you had to pick a side. It's the whole, that's kind of the reason why it's called Fates or If, and the whole reason why you have choices in general. The problem here is, this is probably the biggest problem is just the way the game is structured in terms of buying it. What the game expects you to do is play the first 5 chapters, which are the same no matter which version of the game you're playing, Birthright, Conquest, or Revelations, and then the decision chapter is like chapter 6. The problem is you make that decision before you even play the fucking game. Because of the way this game is structured, it's, you buy Birthright, then you're dedicated to the Hoshido path. You have no other choice. You gotta play Hoshido unless you're going to download Conquest. Now, a lot of people are exaggerating, like, well, you've already made your choice as soon as you buy it, which to an extent you have, because let's say you only wanted to buy one version, then whatever you bought, you're kind of stuck with. Now, if you're willing to pay the extra $20 for the digital version of the other path, let's say you play the first 5 chapters and you become more attached to the Conquest, the North side of things before even playing, but you bought Birthright, you can go buy the digital version of Conquest for like half off. And granted, I know that isn't the ideal way, but it is probably one of the problems in the game. And if you're the kind of person who, you have to make a decision before you make the decision. So the first 5 chapters I don't feel is rushed like some people do. I feel like it does a good enough job of explaining Hoshido and Nor, so you have attachment to both sides when the time comes. Is it kind of quick paced? Yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm not sitting here trying to drag out every little fucking interaction. I mean, that was kind of like the tutorial stuff kind of drags on. And granted, considering this game is supposed to be more noob friendly, kind of. I still would argue Awakening's probably still more noob friendly than this. Although playing this would make Awakening a fucking cakewalk. My whole thing is that as far as the characters, as far as the first 5 chapters are concerned, I think they do a good job. Now, as I said before, the fact that you have to buy the games before even knowing either one of the families kind of takes the whole choice thing out of the option. Also, the fact that all the pre-release material is pretty much spoiled the first 5 chapters. The ideal way to even approach that is to watch the first 5 chapters of any route because they're all the damn same. And then, before buying the game, make your decision based off of what you've watched on YouTube. That's it. Which obviously is not the way you should be. It's obviously not the way they wanted you to do this, but to me that's like the most ideal way. To be able to still feel like you can, that's just a problem with the structure and pricing of the game. It's the whole separating it into 3 parts and pretty much saying that you gotta buy, that you're making your choice as soon as you buy one. Instead of what I thought the game was gonna do, which is you pick one and it locks you into that choice. Which would have made more sense, unfortunately, that's not what they did. So let's get into the story proper. Now, this will have a pretty decent amount of spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, I expect you to stop watching now. If you pick the Hoshido route, what you're essentially doing is fighting against King Garen along with your siblings, and also with the retainers and the other characters you would get on the Conquest route. Because you're not playing Conquest, of course you're not getting those characters, therefore meaning that you're fighting against them in later chapters. And I will give the story credit in certain aspects. I feel like a lot of people have given the story a lot of shit. Although I would still easily say it's better than Awakenings just for the sake of because of dynamic situations. Like, the biggest problem Awakening had in terms of its story was the fact that not only was it safe as fuck, and it wasn't up to Fire Emblem standards, but it's also like the most like stereotypical anime game shit. It's like the whole concept versus Destiny and Fate, which is kind of funny considering this game's title. And then the whole, there's deaths in Awakening, but like none of them fucking matter. Almost none of them matter. Even the final death in the game doesn't really fucking matter in the grand scheme of things. There's only like really 2 or 3 characters who actually die and stay dead. Because if you played Awakening has paralogs. Some of them had to do with the kid characters, and some of them had to do with just side characters. Some of the side characters you can fucking meet are literally like characters that you've killed in the main campaign. For example, your dead fucking sister. Which there is no main story plot reasoning behind that. It's just fucking showed to you that, oh, she's fine, she just has amnesia. And I'm like, you really take out the emotional impact, and then there's just not enough dynamic situations in it. Like, I think the best chapter in Awakening for that kind of stuff was after the chapter Emmeryn dies, and the first fight you have is with a guy and his soldiers who really don't want to fight them because they were moved by Emmeryn's sacrifice. It's like one of the more interesting chapters in the game, and then everything else is just stereotypical fights. I think there are more variations in the fights in Fates than there are in Awakening, although it does still suffer from being that stereotypical, we got to stop the evil guy because he's evil, because he's a dick, while doing these subtle hints to, well, is he truly evil? And then how the siblings also mention how he didn't always used to be this way. It's that subtle, go play the other fucking route because you might learn something new. It's not like one of those asinine cliffhanger teases that pisses you off. It's just one of those like, there's more to this than what you're thinking of. But I feel like there's a lot more variation here, especially with the whole fucking Zola stuff they do around the middle of the game with Takumi and Zola. Although it does still play out the stereotypical tropes that, and it's almost the same trope between 2 different fucking characters. Leo and Takumi both play that fucking younger brother. Well, actually, no, I think they're older. The older brothers who are fucking jealous of their sibling. Now, granted, Takumi's is more so of him having just issues compared to Ryoma, whereas Leo's actually literally seem like he has issues towards Corrin. But it's the same fucking problem, and it's the same goddamn gimmick, and you're just sitting there going, yeah, this is kind of fucking redundant. And granted, this is just based off the Birthright path. I don't even know how it is in Conquest. The story also has a lot more of those serious tones. The one thing I don't really care for is that the game, I found out by watching an LP of Birthright that the game actually features some situations where you can prevent certain deaths in the game. And by the way, deaths actually mean something in this game, because they actually fucking stay dead. Thank you, God. That was the most annoying fucking thing in Awakening. Characters get killed off, and then they'd be fucking fine in a paralog with maybe some minor changes in their personality, because, dying will do that to you, or near-death experiences will do that to you. But Birthright has these weird situations where you can actually stop a death. But here's the problem with that game mechanic. They don't fucking tell you can do that. There's a particular character who dies around the middle point of the game that I didn't find out until watching someone's LP where he mentioned, oh yeah, you can save him if you get an A-rank support with him. And I'm sitting there going, well, how the fuck was I supposed to know that? Like, and that's what I hate. It's almost a Xenoblade effect. You can change how certain things end, but they never tell you that's what's happening. You kind of have to just hear it through word of mouth or someone who's already played the fucking game, like, numerous times. Which is like the worst way to tell me about a fucking mechanic that is in the game. If I can save these characters, let me know I can save these characters. Give me like a really subtle example in the beginning. That's what the fuck they did. They just said, fuck it. And you had to find out the hard way, because your character either dies or they don't die. And you had to compare stories with other gamers to be like, oh, you can save such and such. So the story, although I don't think it's that much better, is better, and I think it's a little bit more dynamic and a lot more interesting in that aspect. But it still suffers from being that stereotypical we gotta beat the bad guy bullshit with the little subtle hints of maybe he isn't as bad as you think he is. Da 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 da. You know, the whole traitor arc that goes on throughout the game. It's the same thing. The Azura subplot. You know, it's all like all these little things aren't bad. They're just not inherently amazing. And considering what Fire Emblem has a lot of social commentary in it from the previous games. The Awakening and Fates kind of feels like Fates is almost a direct sequel to Awakening in terms of story, and not a sequel to Fire Emblem game stories. So what you end up getting is a game that, although isn't a terrible story in comparison to other Fire Emblem stories, is just fucking disappointing. Luckily, the best thing about the game and some of the best things about Awakening are still in here. Particularly the characters and the gameplay. Actually, the gameplay is a lot better, is a lot more strategy based, and is a lot more interesting, which is what we shall get into next. Okay, so they've changed the weapon. They've changed a lot about the weapon system from Awakening to this game. The first thing to be noted of is that there's no durability except for like stabs and shit, which are the healing items, which makes sense because if you had healing items that all they can do is heal and there's no fucking limit on it, then there's no point in buying multiple healing items because they all would never break. Those are the only things that still break from Awakening. Everything else doesn't. What they switched it out for, though, is instead of having your other weapons break, they all have different status effects and differences in terms of how effective they are. They've split up the usefulness of the weapons. The weaker weapons are the ones that tend to have better follow-up attacks and better hit rates, but they do like jack shit all in damage. It's like 3 or 4 damage, maybe times 2 to do 8. But the higher weapons have a lower hit rate, but when they do hit, it's for a ridiculous amount more damage. And also, you can't do follow-up attacks as well. Or it's not as consistent. Actually, in some weapons case, you can't follow up at all. Which gets into probably the more interesting part of some of the things they've changed for the mechanics. Especially, you know, the pairing up system that was reintroduced in Awakening. They have changed it to where it doesn't feel as OP as fuck. If anyone played Awakening, you know that Awakening suffered from halfway through the game, all you had to do was pair up your character with like their wife or husband, and they would just wreck shit. Especially some of the characters later on, like fucking Donald. Oh my god. It was a fucking, like, Awakening was a cakewalk purely because the mechanics were so geared in your favor that you could break the damn game. The other thing I should mention is that they've changed the weapon triangle, and I'll get back to how they changed the pair-up system in a second. They've changed the triangle to include magic and some new weapons like knives and shuriken. So here's the new weapon triangle. Tomes and swords beat tomes, magical tomes. Tomes and swords beat axes and arrows. Yeah, axes and arrows. And axes and arrows beat lances and shuriken / knives. And then knives and shuriken / knives and lances beat tomes and swords. They've essentially just added 3 more things in there. The knives and shuriken class. They've actually can put the arrow class in an actual class, like it wasn't, because the arrow before was just kind of a long range weapon. Before it was lances, axes, and swords. In Awakening, they've added bows in as a part of the triangle, and tomes a part of the triangle too, versus tomes that were kind of broken once again. Granted, all they ever gave you was fucking dark magic and like normal magic, versus here. And granted, it's still about the same. They've just still bunched it all together. But at least it's a part of the triangle now. And so not only do you have to figure out these new weapon triangle, but you also have to fix it with the guard and pair-up system. In the game, the way they've changed it here is that before, when you paired up in Awakening, you had the chance of not only double attacking, but also having that your partner defend for you. They split it up. Essentially now is, if your characters are next to each other, you will always get a dual attack, but you will never get any defense boost. Meaning, there is no chance of your partner defending, blocking an attack for you if you're just next to each other. If you're paired up, you get that advantage. That also means when your enemies pair up, that also stops them from dual attacking you. they can't dual attack you because you have your partner and you're actually paired up. And you also have kind of like this shield gauge that builds up, and when it hits the very end, you're guaranteed to block an attack always. Whereas before that, it's a very kind of 60, 40, 70, 30% chance that your partner will block for you until the gauge is refilled. This makes the whole pairing up option not as ridiculous as it was in Awakening, where in Awakening you had no reason for your characters to be by themselves. Here you need to, also because of the way Conquest plays. But in Birthright is such a fucking cakewalk because the major difference in Birthright compared to Conquest is map objectives. I don't know about map layouts, but I know map objectives and the fact that you can grind in Birthright. You can't grind at all in Conquest. So considering all that, this change is more interesting for Conquest than it is for Birthright. Does it come in handy for Birthright? Sometimes, but I'll be honest with you, even at the end of the day, I was still pairing up the majority of the time because it still makes the strategy just as interesting. On top of the fact that because all these weapons now have secondary effects, the one thing I really like about the weapon change is that it makes me switch weapons more often. Whereas in fucking Awakening, I would just grab the strongest weapons. Like, oh, this is B rank, fuck it, this is what I'm going with. Oh, this is D rank, fuck that, I want the fucking A rank or the S. Well, I think there's S rank weapons in Fates. I don't think there were ever S rank weapons in Awakening. The difference now is that, maybe one of your, and I love the dual series for all the main weapons. The dual series for the weapons are pretty much weapons that reverse the triangle situation. Like, usually a dual, like a sword is usually weak against a lance. A dual sword is strong against lances, but now is weak against arrows. And it creates a layer of strategy where it's like, you have a dual sword, and you want to go beat this dude with the lance, but the problem is you're now in the range of the dude with the arrow. The arrow wouldn't have done really shit to you. And it also plays up this whole thing where now, if you're initiating the attack, you're likely to do more damage versus them attacking you. So the game is encouraging you to attack more. It's a lot of extra little things, and then you have, on top of that, you have more abilities that have more varying effects. It's just gotten... They've also nerfed some of the abilities, but I'm not going to get into that because it's getting really technical and most players won't really notice that as much. Also because there's already enough to talk about purely with just the differences from Awakening, not getting into the damn abilities. It creates a whole new layer of strategy for these fights. Also some of the monsters. The only thing that's really not included in the weapon classes are the monsters, which I think you've seen in the trailers. The monsters with the stone faces and the weird, dark monsters that are, chained in their hands and their faces covered. I think even in the game they're called the Faceless, which are probably the more disappointing aspect of the battle mechanics because those two monsters are fuck. Well, the stone-faced monster is actually somewhat of a threat. The fucking Faceless monsters are fucking jokes. Because, because they're not a part of the triangle, literally anything can kill them. That's the biggest problem I have with, this is why I don't understand why not putting them in the triangle. Because when you don't put them in the triangle, they become susceptible to everything, so there's no real strategy in how to take those fuckers out. I also like the fact that, the enemy units can pair up. Now granted, I played this on normal and classic, and the enemy units did it in Birthright, but not to a point where I felt like I was being overwhelmed. Granted, Birthright is said to be the easier of the three games, but still, it didn't happen that often, although it has bit me in the ass. And the other gameplay mechanic I want to talk about, which really isn't a gameplay mechanic, it's just something I've noticed they changed. The hit, crit, and miss rates have fucking been changed to the point where, the level of luck that some of these enemy units get is fucking ridiculous. Now, granted, on one hand, I like this because it creates a situation where I can be worried of them having a crit rate too, versus, because I don't think barely any enemies in Awakening, if any enemies in Awakening ever got crits on you. I got critted fucking at least 10 damn times in Birthright by motherfuckers who had a 5% crit rate, and on top of that, had a fucking hit rate of 30 or 40 fucking percent. On one hand, I like it because it makes me more wary, and I like it gives the enemies kind of the same advantage I have. The problem is that not only does it work that way, it also works in the reverse. Whereas I can have a hit rate of fucking 70 or 80 and still goddamn miss. Bruh, I don't know how I feel about that as a whole. I like it, but I also hate it because I feel like I'm being cheated in some aspects. It's like, dude, I had an 80% hit rate and I missed both hits. That's bullshit. And then the dude comes back with a 5% crit rate and fucking kills me. And then I gotta restart the goddamn map because I lost the character to some bullshit. You know, which is just kind of the RNG nature you have to kind of deal with. The map design is so much fucking better. A lot of people complained about Awakening, and granted, I love Awakening still, but I will easily admit Awakening suffered from having a lot of open spaces and you just trudging through them with like some slight variations later on in the game. In this game, especially with the Dragon Vein mechanic, although in the beginning of the game it's so heavily geared towards your favor, it's kind of fucking stupid. Later in the game it gets a lot harder. For example, the Dragon Veins are now presented to your siblings and your enemy units, and you're the one, and you have to be aware of what they can do to you. Especially one of the maps you fight Camilla on, where she can summon where she can do a lightning strike, and it can knock your fucking dude, it can knock whoever's in that area range down to 1 HP, which then all it fucking needs to do is the enemy unit needs to come by and just hit you once. And considering the difference, considering how the damn hit and crit rate and miss rate have been changed in this game, shit's not hard to do. You can get killed by a dude who has a 20% hit rate because why the fuck not, game? Which means I can only imagine in Conquest that being a complete bitch. I can only goddamn imagine. Now, let's get into the map design. Now, as I said before, the map design in Fates is a lot fucking better, and and as I said, it's partially due to the difference, to the addition to the Dragon Vein stuff, where the Dragon Veins can either help you or fuck up a situation, and later in the game, it actually starts making a difference in how you approach situations. For example, in one of them, the Dragon Vein gives you the option to completely destroy, like doing like a landslide thing, which can hurt all enemies in the range. Now you have a choice. You can either do it early or later. The earlier you do it, the less people you'll be able to get in it. The later you do it, you run the risk of getting your shit wrecked, but the more people you can damage and get off the damn field at once. Also, they introduced the whole, well, they're Batistas and they're also like fire orbs and shit. Like, it's kind of like a long range magic cannon. That's the best way to describe it. Where mages can get to and archers can get to like the other ones. And you can they can man it, and then they can hit you from a range, which can completely fuck you up. It's like you're covered in terms of all the enemies. It's like, all right, look, there's like 2 enemies that can hit me. I'm set up. I got my dual guard, and I'm ready. I got the HP to take it. And then this motherfucker comes out with the fucking magical cannon and knocks like 11 HP off you, and you get killed because of it. There's like all these little elements of creating an extra layer of strategy, so you also have to not only worry about the enemies attacking you, but the ones that are hanging in the back doing background shit that you don't know about. Even in some of the earlier chapters of the game where you're fighting through the woods, there's these goddamn traps that pop up that can knock off damage every turn. You gotta worry about that and getting into areas where you can't, you're not taking pot shots, while at the same time worrying about the enemies attacking you, and also worrying about your units not getting killed by the enemies that may attack them, because not only are they weaker, but they've also lost HP due to the fucking traps on the ground. Hell, in one of the goddamn maps, you're fighting in a dragon's mouth. And that's when they even play with the village mechanic. In Awakening, it was the whole, you go to a village, you talk to them, and it's the thing in Fire Emblem in general. You go to a village, you talk to them, they give you an item, and then you leave. Well, in one of the maps in here, it's like you go to a village, and like half of them will do that, but the other half will also warn enemies coming to attack you. That's actually how I got killed a few times. Because I waited until the end of the turn. It's like, alright, look, I'll do everything else, position all my units, and then I'll go to the village, get this item, and then I'll be done. I went and did it, and then the dude's like, oh, they're over here, and then you see these fucking 3 or 4 units come out, and I'm like, oh shit, and then like 3 of my units die. It's that type of design that keeps every map fresh, and it keeps you guessing. And I like the variation. Not every map is a fucking 100% winner, but God, the variation's so much better than a simple, I gotta trudge from this side of the map all the way over to the other side of the map, and then, I can get them. Woo! Like, ain't gotta say this, but I actually really still enjoy Awakening. Although Birthright, gameplay-wise, beats the shit out of it. It is a marginally better game, gameplay-wise. Story, it's a little bit better, but fucking gameplay, it beats the shit out of Awakening. It's ridiculous. And then the final sections we can get into is the My Castle and the characters. My Castle. Oh my god. I know this feature has a lot of controversy behind it for a lot of different reasons. Particularly because it also goes into the censorship. I'm not going to get into that because that's not really the point, because the question is, should you buy this version of the game? Because if you spoke Japanese and had the money, you already bought a Japanese 3DS and bought Japanese Fire Emblem Myth. Obviously, if you're watching this review, you haven't done any of that, so we're not going to address the localization stuff. Maybe like a later video, but right, not now. Fuck it. I think there's enough talk about it. So let's talk about My Castle. My Castle is pretty much like the Barracks was in Awakening, but like heavily expanded upon, and it's fucking great. It's great. It's great not to have to do those stupid, you go click the barracks and wait, and it sets up like the list of things of going on, like relationship statuses, maybe a surge, maybe it's a character's birthday. It's not doing, like, you don't have to sit there and wait for the two characters to trudge over to be like, what do you do? What do you do in your free time when you're not in battle? I do da-da-da-da. Relationship has improved. You ain't gotta wait for that shit. It still has that type of shit in Fates. It's just a simple text box where you go, alright, I'm done. And I like the fact that all your smithy and like the fucking rod shops and all this extra stuff is in here. You got a place where you can cook, which can give possible stat boosts, and it all depends on whether whoever's in the whoever is in the mess hall can cook or not, and what you're actually cooking in general. I love it. I love it because it's convenient. I can also make it mine by customizing and personalizing where I put shit. You can do the cool invasion stuff, the amiibo stuff, the online internet battles, and all that other shit. It's a cool fucking feature. I know people don't like aspects of it, like the obvious gearing towards dating sim elements, especially with the My Castle feature. I mean, especially with the private quarters feature, where you can invite, and granted, it's an easy way to build up supports. I mean, on a mechanic level, it is convenient. It doesn't take away from the experience. Also, if you're a sucker for waifus and husbandos, totally, it's fucking worth it just on that premise, alright? And if not, you can go look at the fucking audio clips on YouTube like everybody else does. God, fucking love Setsuna. Fucking love her, she's fucking adorable. Which gets into like my final part, which is the characters. Just as good as Awakening, I would say. Just to pick some standouts: Kagero, Setsuna, Azuma, Kana, Selkie, Kaden, Rinka, Oboro, Mozu, Silas. You know, they're all, it's still the same colorful cast. Rajat, by the way, Rajat better than Tharja. Eat a dick. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. Boy. But the characters are just as good. So as an overall product, do I think Birthright is worth it? Fucking duh. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to wait until I beat the game before I gave this part of the review was because I wanted to see if Birthright could stand on itself, by itself as a game, instead of being like one of the paths in the Fire Emblem Fates experience. Now, if you're a Fire Emblem fan, you're gonna play all three versions regardless. But for those who aren't, Birthright works as a standalone fucking title. You know, you don't gotta play Conquest of Revelations. It has teases of stuff, but nothing but like the actual story in itself, the standalone story, works. You can play it and be perfectly content with the ending. So, I fucking like it. Now, whether I think it's better than Conquest of Revelations will all take time. A lot of fucking time. Because I got Pokken, Bravely Second, Star Fox. It'll take time, but damn it, we'll get to it. So, yeah, I think we're done here. I think we're done. So this has been the Insane Game Freak. Life's a game. Play to win. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace!